Ladies and gentlemen, we're here. We're here finally. We're in the third of this trilogy of articles. We're at the Pottinger Ultimatum.
Here we
I'm
are.
here with Rhys and Adam of Schism, and I am so excited. It's going to be a bit of a trek. We're going through some details, and it's going to be really exciting. But I've waited a long time, nearly a year, to explain this story in full, and we're nearly at the end. So, hello, guys.
How you doing? Yeah, we're looking forward to the third and final part of the Pottinger trilogy.
Yeah, been hell of a story so far. Almost unbelievable.
An epic journey.
Isn't it? Isn't it so?
More to come as well, of course, Johnny.
Yeah. We'll talk about that another time, though, shan't we? It's not. We don't want to either scare people too much or whatnot. I'm talking about the people involved, because the fact is, this is going to be an adventure today. We are continuing on the adventure, and for people who may have decided not to have watched the first two or read the first two articles, because maybe this is the one that everybody's sharing or whatnot, you should know where we are, because John Stanley Pottinger, who was born in around 1940, I think, had been brought up by a man who was a Mason, 32nd or 33rd degree, because he was Scottish Rite, Bohemian Grover, an insurance man, Dayton City Commissioner, and eventually him and his brother would take certain positions. His brother would fake his own disappearance as he run off and trafficked a babysitter across state lines to have sex with her illegally. And Pottinger would go off to Harvard and forge his own career. And his career, first he'd go to Harvard, study government, study law. John Stanley Pottinger. Their father died before the same year John Stanley Pottinger goes to Harvard. He first studies government, then he studies law, then he leaves in about 1964, 1965, joins Broad, Curry and Schultz or something like that, I think it's called, law practice, tries one case and then gets picked up by the Nixon administration. 1969, he goes in as an advisor for the Department of Health, Education and Welfare. In 1970, he's put as a head of the Office for Director Civil Rights, or Office for Civil Rights. It's about desegregation. It's like got a remit, I believe, under the Justice Department, even though it's working out of the Health, Education and Welfare section of the government. And by 1973, settled into power, and that's where the party starts. That's where John Stanley Pottinger comes into his own, and he's responsible in finding no conspiracy in the very conspiratorial cases of the assassination of Martin Luther King, the Kent State Massacre, and of course Watergate itself, where he stays on under the Carter administration. Eventually, he sits through the terms of Nixon and Ford, and it stays on a little bit under Carter. He's given special permission to be a special advisor to finish covering up Watergate. Amazing. And that'll come up again in this article today as well. Then when he left government, he became a lawyer, where he tried some massive cases. They were weird cases, compliance cases for big companies after the Banking Secrecy Act had come in 1970, and 1978 it started to be enforced. Pottinger left government. I mean, I didn't even mention Orlando Letelier and the assassination of Orlando Letelier, or the standoff at Wounded Knee, which were both events Pottinger took major roles in, really significant roles in. Wounded Knee, harassing the people who stood up against the corrupt government or the corrupt reservation leaders, because it was, of course, about Indian reservation. And the assassination of Orlando Letelier saw Pottinger get special permission for the head of the CIA, director of the CIA, then his friend George H.W. Bush, to use domestic surveillance on U.S. citizens, which of course is taboo. But then afterwards, like I say, he goes off. The Banking Secrecy Act is enforced in 1978 properly, and so he works for Meade, stopping a hostile takeover. But he also goes and works for Chemical Bank, where they look for basically compliance issues that would cause them to have big fines later, so they can cover him up. He's a cover-up man. He's a fix-it man. But then it's even more. In 1980, he's defending the arms dealer Gerald V. Bull in court, who smuggled weapons partially on behalf of the CIA for a war against communist Angola to South Africa illegally. He defends him, and in the same year, he's going to take up arms smuggling as well, which is amazing. He's also going to be central to the October surprise. He's central to Iran-Contra, and he is organizing and smuggling arms along CIA's finest, including Cyrus Hashemi, who deals and has lots of dealings with Adnan Khashoggi, who's also involved, and Adnan Khashoggi, of course, is part funded by this period and by someone else who is involved in Iran-Contra too, and that is Jeffrey Epstein himself. So the lead lawyer for the Epstein victims run guns in Iran-Contra. So did Jeffrey Epstein, Adnan Khashoggi, and Cyrus Hashemi. So that's just through the looking glass. And of course, it gets exposed between 1984 and 1986. Lots comes out about Pottinger's involvement, and he goes and runs off to Mexico and lays low. But by 1987, he's lifted back up. George H.W. Bush is going to pardon everybody involved in all the different things. Reagan's already pardoned other people for other involvement in things. Stanley Pottinger, he doesn't have to worry. J. Stanley Pottinger becomes Stanley Pottinger, and eventually just becomes Stan Pottinger. He's entering up to retirement, and this is where we're getting to now. We are hitting the moment now where he starts to come into his own. Retirement, best-selling author, and then one of the lead legal advisors for the Jeffrey Epstein victims. How did he get there? How did this man who's been involved in so much, why would this CIA stalwart be installed into the Jeffrey Epstein case? Me wonders. So,
well, it's just so insane that even on the level that he knew Epstein, that alone should have meant, right, he cannot defend the victims of this man that he knows.
Yeah.
But not only did he know him, he had really corrupt dealings with him involving gun smuggling.
Yeah, and I mean, as we'll hear in this episode as well, he claims that during that period where they were both involved in running arms in Iran-Contra, that he was shared an office with Jeffrey Epstein.
Wow. And
that they had been in separate banks. So this is a really interesting. We've got a lot to go through. We probably should get on with it.
I mean, he's changed his name so many times. It kind of feels like, because it's getting shorter each time. He's going like the Prince route. At the end, it would just be a symbol. What would that symbol be?
It'd be a merge of the J, the S, and a P. All together.
And if you do that, then you just get the $sign probably, and that is about right. The almighty dollar. Stan is an all-American man. If the all-American dream is some horrific Kissinger Nixonian nightmare from the late 60s, early 70s, he's living this dream that's weird. It's a weird morphed version of the American dream. And you could tell that the previous dreams of what America could be and would be that happened before World War II weren't so mixed with fascist ideology and the Nazis that they had brought in and the communists that they had projected of trying to destroy, but then had incorporated part of Leninist propaganda into their own systems. So I mean, this is what we see in Stanley Pottinger. I think is this like indulgent, dark, post-war version of the American dream, personified by a man who is one of the fix-it guys. There's not many around who are at that level. I tell people there's a handful. Epstein was one of them. He could fix it for you. Pottinger was one of them. He could fix it for you.
Jimmy Savile was one.
Yeah.
He could fix it for you.
But Jimmy Savile could fix it on actual higher levels. He had connections all over the place as well, didn't he? So, I mean, that's probably became a joke. Maybe that's even what made Jim will fix it come up, because he got such a name as a fixer. But these people, what makes them different than everybody else? Confidence. Just confidence. That's all. Stan the man thinks he's the best thing since Winston Wolfe, and in his job he might be. So I think I'm going to share screens with you now.
Let's do it.
If you don't mind.
Let's go.
Click a button or two and start off on this NewsHound Avenger, this NEWSPASTE Schism crossover, the third of them for the Pottinger Ultimatum. And we're starting off in the Associated Press. Oh, you could trust the mainstream. And this is a timeline.
Let's have a little look at this artist impression. Is that Ghislaine there?
Oh, no,
I mean, her eyes are darting all over the shop.
It might be an exact representation. He's got such small hands. Is that Trump who's next to him? Next to her.
She looks like Sloth from the Goonies.
Yeah.
With the one higher eye.
Hey, CIA.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Hannibal Lecter's in the background as well.
Sleeping.
Well, that's good because you don't want Hannibal Lecter awake. And
it's
anyway,
so funny that they're doing these artist impressions and they've all got masks on, so you can't really even see their faces.
No, you definitely can see. That is so fantastic. That artist, they've chosen this. Associated Press News said, which article do we think is the best, or which photo is the best to front up this article? And it's this. It's this. Oh, it's actually one of three. So there's actually three. So there's another one here. Woo! Look at that. Yeah, hello beard. That's the first thing I was looking at. Look at that beard. Anyway, and the next one over here. Who are those guys? Who are those guys?
Who's that hand?
Yeah, no, it's God. That's it. It's God. It's God's point.
If you ever see these two, stay away.
Yeah, and maybe it's this family, because this is where we start this. On March 2005, police in Palm Beach, Florida, began investigating Epstein after the family of a 14-year-old girl reports she was molested at his mansion. Multiple underage girls, many of them high school students, would later tell police that Epstein hired them to give sexual massages. This would blow out of control, but they already knew this was coming. They had their fingers in every single pie. Well, more than pies, obviously. Down here, May 2006, it took a year, basically. So that's March, over a year. Palm Beach police officials signed paperwork to charge Epstein with multiple counts of unlawful sex with a minor. But the county's top prosecutor, State Attorney Barry Krischer, is it Krischer? Yeah. Takes the unusual step of sending the case to a grand jury. So already they're sending it to a grand jury, but that puts it in amongst the hierarchy of the system and allows it probably to be covered up easier. Look how long it takes. From the first investigation, when did they arrest him first? Federal prosecutors indict Epstein in 2007. I'm sure he's arrested in 2006. They file and they charge Epstein with multiple counts of unlawful sex with a minor, but they want to send it to a grand jury. It takes a long time. It ends up with him going to jail in 2009. And we all know what that jail cell was like. And this is, of course, we're going through the article today, the Pottinger Ultimatum. And I do start off by making a few things clear. Let me just make this big and show you, explain a little bit of something to you. Yep. As you see in the draft, people are seeing the draft of the article. They're seeing behind the curtain. But I wanted to explain something, And so I'm going to read out the beginning of this. In March 2005, the first official police investigation began in Florida after the family of a 14-year-old girl reported she had been molested in Palm Beach residence. However, the police investigation wasn't a surprise to Epstein and his inner circle. In fact, Epstein was already aware of multiple accusations surfacing against him, and his high-profile trips with former President Clinton in 2002 had assured his fate. Epstein's cover had been blown wide open. For the first time, it led to him receiving a slew of unwanted media attention. Epstein later reportedly told a friend that same year, "If my ultimate goal was to stay private, traveling with Clinton was a bad move on the chessboard. I recognize that now, but you know what? Even Kasparov makes them. You move on. In 2005, that was my best Epstein impression. In 2005, as the Epstein cartel learned their operation could no longer stay hidden, a clear and obvious ultimatum formed. If Epstein took no action, the consequences would be dire. This is where we are. 2005. Understand that I covered it in these trips. This is Epstein 101 series that you'll also find on NEWSPASTE, which look at Clinton and Epstein's relationship.
If there's, can we just go back up to the photo for a sec? If you notice all the pictures of him and Ghislaine when they're like at a party or something like that, she's always sort of nuzzling into him and looking at him almost like starry-eyed, but he's always just giving that look to the camera.
Yeah, the same look.
He's never looking at her. He's always just looking at you going, hey, it's me.
You want to give me a massage?
Yeah.
But do you know, I think that's got to do with his very weird shaped head. Because I think he was very aware. Have you seen, you know, everybody's seen them, the ones with him and Trump, and they look like excited little schoolboys at the White House party or some party that was going on, big party happening somewhere swanky. And Epstein looks so weird and misshapen. Is like he's got like this little body, he's a little stocky guy with this massive head that's like really big over here, really long at the front, like, you know, or he almost looks like a cartoon dog in many regards, you know, Epstein, I've always felt in photos. So I think he purposely looks at the camera because he knows that. He looks funny if he doesn't. And she...
Right, okay. That's his best profile, you're saying.
Yeah, and she wants to project that they are a couple out to other people, and that probably stops people asking questions. If everybody thinks that they're just like in love and happy and they're together, then they're not going to ask questions about why their daughter's going off on their island for a weekend and coming back crying, you know? This article covers the Epstein and Clinton trips. And it is a very, like, especially 2002, them traveling around Asia and Africa is extremely interesting. I found this photo. This had been a previously undiscovered photo when I was researching for One Nation Under Blackmail. Was going through the archives of each of the countries' main, like, sort of photography. Like in this was the Singapore official archives for the National Singapore Gallery or archives, and of course I knew the days that he was there, so I just went through every archive I could in every single country that I could find, and eventually I came across this where Clinton's up here and they're meeting with all these different Singaporean officials and businessmen, and there's Epstein and Maxwell down there. There was actually a selection of photos with them, one where they're around a dinner table, and some where they're walking somewhere else, but these were the journeys, and that's where he's meeting with the Sultan of Brunei.
That looks low key.
Yeah, I know. Well, Epstein and Maxwell are behind the scenes. We don't see them. They're off camera. I think they were purposely kept off camera on those ones. But that's from a Brunei newspaper. So I was able to track down the meetings in the Brunei newspaper and find out other stuff. Some of the people who rode on the African Odyssey, as I call it, included Kevin Spacey and what's his face, Chris Tucker, and also some of these people. So this is Ron Burkle. He's quite a rich guy, Democrat backer, if I remember correctly, like most of them are, financier. And then Casey Wasserman, whose father, Lou Wasserman, is one of the most interesting men in history. They founded the Wasserman Foundation. That's extremely interesting. So those voyages around Africa and Asia are really interesting. They led to him getting a high profile. And for articles like this coming out, I can't remember when this was. Oh, there it is. So this is 2002. So this is just at the end, I think, of just after he's traveled around Africa with Clinton, and they talk.
I'm loving the comment there. Epstein dresses down. He always dresses down.
yeah, I know. He never. Epstein doesn't dress up is probably most right, except in that one photo we've seen on the previous one where he's pretended to be James Bond because he's probably as close to what James Bond is in reality. So this is a very famous article. Used to have a different cover. This is a cover with the pouting cover, I think. Jeffrey Epstein, International Money Man of Mystery, and this is what raised his profile massively. And this was one of the many articles that ended up being complete puff pieces for him, but asking some questions. It's a life full of question marks. Let me just, that's why I'd put up there, because I was looking for Kasparov when I was looking through this, because this is where the quote comes from, this article, where he says, he says to a friend, if my ultimate goal was to stay private, traveling with Clinton was a bad move. I recognize that now. So this is the article where he states that out loud. But this is it. His cover was broken at this point. This is important to understand that in 2002 he broke his own cover. He had managed to stay fairly off the radar, and I say fairly off the radar. I've actually got a load of sites, and it's convenient to be here. So let me just all articles, seeing as we're here.
I like the way that he's like, if I wanted to stay private, I shouldn't have invited Bill Clinton on my plane into my island. It's like, no shit.
Yeah, one of the world's most famous people.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone.
Former president. Yeah, you probably shouldn't.
So here on newspaste.com, I'm trying to add more and more are deleted articles that you can no longer find on websites or archive sites, being completely deleted, that were about the Epstein case. And so this shows that in about 2000, it's taken a while. That's because it's already loaded up. So this is from February 20th, 2000. And this is from the Sunday Times in Perth, Australia. And they're talking about the Duchess of York and Prince Andrew, and then Prince Andrew's relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell. And then they also, like most of these articles, also make a quick reference to Epstein and say, and there's this other guy who's around. That's the same one. There's this other guy who's hanging around. Look, Captain Bob's Girl Afloat. Here we go. This is from 1995. So he was already a little bit, there was some questions where they say one of the most coveted Christmas invitations in Sydney last night proposed harbour cruise in a 100-foot yacht organised by trucking magnate Lindsay Fox. This may have something to do with the guest of honour, Ghislaine Maxwell, a beautiful, feisty 34-year-old daughter of the late disgraced media baron Robert Maxwell, and her millionaire American beau, Jeffrey Epstein, a property developer who's given to zipping around Manhattan in a Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit. So they're starting to notice him even in 1995, and up until the noughties, they're still noticing Jeffrey Epstein and his relationship. I can't remember what I had opened at, and his relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell was starting to be studied. So, in 2002, he started to get known. Now, where's Stan Pottinger around this time? But he's starting in the life. Yeah, look at this man, though. Look at this man. Look at this pattern on his old website. I know. Stan, where it goes down, like he just, that's cool, isn't it?
No.
Yeah.
I've just noticed there's only one A missing out of the word Stan, and it actually says Satan.
Yes, yeah. You know what? I was on a podcast yesterday, and I described his list of stuff that he'd done, and someone said, "Are you?" I hadn't said his name yet, and they said, "Are you talking about Satan?" Is that who you're talking about? It's like very close, very close.
Yeah, and look down here, you've got Satan's newsletter.
About Satan, behind the last Nazi. What's next, Satan?
What's next?
Who was behind the last Nazi? Satan, of course. Of course he was.
About Satan?
Personally, I think Stan is trying to abbreviate his name further here and just trying to be known as Stan. And then eventually it'd be and then he'd be that's it. Have yes. Right, so let's find out what I did. It tells us a lot of it tells us a very clean version of what he did. So let's go up to 77. What he says in 77 though says, in the spring of 77 he served as special assistant to Attorney General in the Carter administration. That's when he's covering up Watergate. After leaving the Justice Department, Pottinger practiced law in Washington until 1981. Well, it's still halfway in 1980, in actual fact, where he became a CIA arms smuggler and committed a coup against his own country. Oh, no, they don't mention that. Oh, when he left his private practice for investment banking in New York City. That sounds like investment banking, doesn't it? Illegally smuggling arms or funding of illegal arms smuggling or whatever part of that process he took, and all of the meeting people collecting money for the CIA, all of that. Is that investment banking or is that a CIA operative? I think he was a CIA
He's
operative.
investing in the people he's speaking to and banking their money for the CIA. There you go.
Woohoo! Though they lose 110,000 here and there.
Well, you win some, you lose some.
Yeah, what can you do when you're dealing with Chemis? Who knows where that money's going? Right, I got to say as well, I'm going to try my hardest during this sitting not to say Adnan Khashoggi and not accidentally say Jamal Khashoggi. So if I at all say Jamal Khashoggi, shout at me, would you? Because it just slips into my mind, of course. He's his nephew. Jamal Khashoggi, who's got his head chopped off at the embassy, was a nephew of Adnan Khashoggi, who was smuggling guns in thing. But it's like Freudian in my head. So anyway, here he did all these things until the early 90s and all of this, and he became an author. But down here it says something really important. It says, and let's get Stan's face in it so that Satan can look at you himself. In 1987, Pottinger was trustee of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and served as a member of the United Nations Association Advisory Committee for Multilateral Projects, which sounds like a fucking intelligence outfit if I have ever heard one coming out of the UN. The United Nations Association Advisory Committee for Multilateral Projects. You mean for cooing countries on behalf of America and pretending you're still the United Nations. He has been a consultant for the Rockefeller Foundation, so trustworthy, and director of NABCO, the National Alliance for Breast Cancer Organizations. Now, it's amazing because Stan Pottinger just loves breasts, so he's bound to be. It's not a surprise, but it's amazing. Rockefeller Foundation, NABCO, UN, all this is all 1987. Like, suddenly all of this stuff happens. 1986, he's laid low from Iran-Contra scandal, which is saying that he's central. And Rudolph Giuliani's making statements like, oh, well, we'll have to see if we're going to prosecute him. You know, he's managed to lay low. And then he gets all of these wonderful bonuses. Membership to all of these new clubs. How lucky you are, Stan. What new clubs was he joining? Well, this club. Here you go. This is amazing. Making the promises of democracy real at the civil rights, whatever. Look at this. And who are they going to show? Yes, segregation. You know, that, why wouldn't Stan Pottinger be central to this this Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights? But who are they going to show? Whose faces are they going to show here? Whose faces are going? There you go. Martin Luther King. Okay? The man who helped cover up the official involvement in the state murder, the state's official involvement in the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. gets appointed to this. And It's an organization that claims, you know, oh, we're representing desegregation and all of that. Well, they've got some strange people doing that, you know, people who don't seem to fit. And in 1995, there is obviously Bush has pardoned everybody responsible with, I think it was Iran-Contra. Reagan's pardoned anybody involved with Watergate. Stanley Pottinger's laid low. He's started to enter into this war where he sat down and he said, I'm going to become a writer. And Paula Spann, this is a part syndicated article, so bits of this go elsewhere. So I think I have a some of this might appear. Yeah. Let's see, Paula Span. Yeah, let's see if this is. Here's a further irrefutable. Yeah, here's further irrefutable evidence that American lives can indeed have second, third, and fourth acts. Stanley Pottinger. And this tells the tale of how Stanley Pottinger is about to become a best-selling author. And it's a really interesting piece because it gives us a little look inside. This has never been Pottinger's problem. Alternatives. In fact, the news that the guy more accustomed to writing legal briefs was writing a novel came as scant surprise to his old friends. He reinvents himself every few years, says Warren Dennis, his former Justice Department colleague and law partner. So he's law partner as well. Go on.
Never thought he might, work for intelligence then?
He
reinvents himself every few years. I mean, it's crazy.
Listen to this. Pottinger has encountered his share of bumpy passages, Dennis notes, but his ability to land on his feet and turn in a stellar performance is unusual. He has a golden touch. Golden touch. Oh, I golden touched that guy right into the canal. Right. Okay. So indeed, he has a tradition of starting at the top. J. Stanley Pottinger was just 29, a few years out of Harvard Law, and self-described white guy from California. What a duck.
Is that any guy in California? The hell?
I'm just a white guy from California, baby. That's all. Oh my God, that means so much to me.
He's clearly not interested in labels.
No, he's not interested in reality though either.
That's a white guy from California.
Yeah, is that? Oh my God. Well, maybe. Wait, was that a joke then? Do you reckon he was saying a joke like, "Oh, because there's none of them"? Yeah, was actually a racist pun. Well,
yeah.
Well, that's good then. I like it.
I think that's just him laying low, isn't it? I'm just a white guy from California.
I'm just a white guy.
I got to do with Operation Condor. Nothing. It was
I got the straightest sideburns in California, baby. Straightest chin you will find in America. You will not find flatter than Stan the Man. Oh my God, it's beautiful. When he joined the Nixon administration in what friends warned as a no-win job, a mess, director of the Office for Civil Rights in the Department of Health, Education and Welfare. 3 years later, he was Assistant Attorney General, running the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, sparring continually with Congress and his own anti-boozing. What does that mean? I'm just a writer. I don't know these things. Anti-abusing administration. He expected twice a day, the Corps relieving him of a job. So basically, he was expecting to be fired. And he talks about these things. Now, what I want to know, and we'll come back to this a little bit. And there's some interesting names come up, like these, like Ruckelhaus and stuff. These names have come up in other investigations that I'm yet to air properly. So he's a really interesting. It was such a bizarre balancing act to do liberal. So this is all about Pottinger and his life.
His golden touch.
Yeah. Most definitely. But what I want to show you, not the four procedure, is this guy. This is the guy who made the comment. Let's get to him before I go back to it. Warren Dennis, who was sitting in with him, who was his colleague, is this guy. You probably won't hear this. Can you hear that?
No.
Good. Then we'll just leave it in the background. So Warren Dennis, this big guy up here, he's actually Civil Rights Committee chairman for the Anti-Defamation League, and the Anti-Defamation League are a pretty serious unit. So it's not like he's any short guy. This guy who was like, oh, he always lands on his feet, got a golden touch. I mean, he could kill anybody. He is this guy. This guy has got a very special role because here he is down at the bottom, and he's basically this is about Secret Service. He basically represents all of the Secret Service personnel around a certain period. Something he says, here we go. Let me read out this. The agent is put out on a car on the next ride, and out on the car on the next ride, says Warren Dennis, an attorney for former civil service agents, Secret Service agents. And in this future, between now and 5 years from now, if you have enough hundreds of incidents when the agent is put out on the car or asked to step away from proximity, we will have an assassinated president. What is the law? What is common sense? Can agents protect presidents who keep saying back off? And so this guy is actually, he eventually dies, obviously, in 2004. So about 10 years after he dies. But he has represented basically almost every major Secret Service member, Secret Service in history, including through the impeachment hearings. But this is much more important, okay? This is much more important. So this guy's big deal, yeah? Warren L. Dennis, big deal, sitting around in Pottinger's house while he's being interviewed by some bump woman about his new career in writing. But what's really significant about this guy is that he became Inspector General, Treasury Department. Warren served as outside counsel to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, established by Congress as a law enforcement clearinghouse to coordinate efforts to rescue missing and abused children nationwide. Now, think about that. Warren Dennis here is sitting with someone who's got links with a child trafficking pedophile who's been accused of lots of different crimes and has links with loads of other people. And he is the outside counsel for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. That's like, when I go through these sort of articles, there's serious connections that could just be missed, because in that Paula Span article, when he's given his little thing, this is a syndicated version, so but when he's given his little rundown of him and they mention who he is, no one really checks, or what does that mean? No one checks, or what is he? Oh, so he's actually Anti-Defamation League. Oh, so he's actually represented every Secret Service agent throughout history. Oh, so he's actually a representative of national missing exploited children. You know, this is what people fail to do, and these are avenues that will spawn other articles. So one of the reasons why I do NEWSHOUND, what we're doing now, is so that people who want to know how to research can see how these links are found and how you find this sort of stuff, because this is really important. What I'm doing isn't done enough and needs to be done more. So I'm flicking down through this piece to see if I can find a really interesting. So he's going through his book, really, but basically, there you go. A successful life of writing, a successful writing life has just got to be the best, he says. This is Pottinger, happily propping his feet up on the coffee table and going about his pleasures of research and the fact that one can write just about anywhere. So she's saying, while she's interviewing him, he's ignoring her and doing research. That's what she's saying. She's trying to paint a picture. So straight away, you know this isn't true. You know this is her embellishing and acting as though it's one way and he's at another way. But you can tell it's a very close circle of people who are involved in. And surprised to see the Washington Post, the people who are involved in the Watergate, all the American, all the president's men. I mean, that's what the circle goes about. Bernstein and what's his face, and their discovery of the Watergate story in the Washington Post. It's really interesting that the Washington Post and New York Times are so central to a lot of these really big events, and then setting the narrative afterwards, almost like it's being made. It's more mobile than painting, easier than photography, less equipment with an exclamation mark. Sorry. Yeah. Less equipment. I think it's a great life. I hope I'm able to sustain it. If not, I'll have to consider alternatives. So that's
like covering up more illegal activities.
Yeah.
I'll go back to my old job.
I'll see if Jeffrey Epstein's got any work for me. No? Well, we'll see about that. Right. So It asked me if I want to borrow again. That's because before I started, I borrowed it to check a couple of things inside, but there was nothing.
Well, he did have a New York Times bestseller. He actually did have a best-selling book.
Yeah, it's first one straight off the bat. It's almost like they already agreed. Yeah, fine, we'll give you we'll post up there. We'll make you big. Remember, New York Times bestseller is only that because it's been allowed to do so.
Yes.
Many books would make New York Times bestseller list. For instance, I think One Nation Under Blackmail, volume 1 or 2 by Whitney Webb may make those lists if the lists were fair and if they weren't trying to censor pieces of work that were actually had a point and were based in fact. But here he is. This is his first book, The Fourth Procedure. This is a novel of medical suspense. And I love it. It's just so nice, isn't it? It's just something about looking at a book and reading from a book, even if it's digital. It's extremely interesting. But yeah, the first procedure, the patient is perfect. The theory is borne out, but something goes terribly wrong. The second procedure, the police are alerted. A pattern is emerging. Time is running out. The third procedure, complications terminated. The risks are mounting. There's only one alternative. The fourth procedure. When it happens, it will make medical history, and then no man will be safe. Basically, a lot of his stuff seems to bear fruit nowadays as things that have happened. But I will allow people to go and read and make up their own mind for that. It's quite freaky, some of this stuff. But it's a medical thriller, but a lot of this is like, I think it even borders on gene therapy stuff. So it's very interesting. Let's get rid of Mr.
Basically laying out COVID.
Yeah. So I'm going to. This is Stan Pottinger's registered base of operation. Okay, this is public knowledge, searchable through the internet. I gotta say that just before I reveal it. Because obviously there's reasons why you would say that normally that would be, but this is we're going to be talking not about Stanley Pottinger himself and where he lives, but we're talking about Stanley Pottinger and where he registers certain companies from eventually, which is this house, 49 Twin Lakes Road. In fact, his son lives next door in a house, and he owns another house, or at least did own another house, 168 or something like that. I can't remember one, but on the same road. So this is extremely interesting. This was purchased. I'll be able to show you. This is the Mount Vernon Argus. I love the names of papers from abroad, from anywhere. 20th of August, 1989. It's a Sunday. We're on page 93, Lewisboro. And here we see Twin Lakes Road, South Salem, sold by Robert Fox to Stanley Pottinger of New York City for $675,000, which is quite a bit of money back in 1989. But Stanley Pottinger had been an investment banker sharing a desk with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, he smuggled guns and arms to Iran for the CIA, and he had successfully got Bush and Reagan elected in the White House. I'm sure that probably pays well.
It certainly pays for a house at Twin Lakes Road.
Certainly does. Certainly, and eventually pays for a couple of houses on Twin Lake Road. How about 3? Let's have 3. Let's keep going. But why not? We have another house too. We'll have another house. 1990, the following year, he spends $2.5 million. Now, how much is that? Can you
$3.25 million in a year on 2 properties. And he just got this money laying around, does he?
Just laying around. Well, in a sense, his father was an insurance man who owned John Pottinger Insurance, so he must have had some money inherited, and he probably invested it quite well. But I would say working for the CIA, you're likely to get loads of different opportunities. Stan's always, as we'll learn later, Stan, even up to the past few years, has been looking for opportunities to make big money. big money. So this is called Long Cabbage Home, sells for 2.5 million. My holy hell in a handbag. I cannot tell you how what I just finding this. I didn't expect to find that Stanley Pottinger had lived in Palm Beach. Just did not expect it. Did not expect it at all. It was a shock for me because I hadn't heard that at all in any of the things I had read, and I hadn't noticed it anywhere, and I hadn't come across any of the databases I looked at until I looked closer later and then discovered the whole family had lived there. And this is buying in the Long Cabbage Island subdivision, and I couldn't find the Long Cabbage Island. I don't think it's called Long Cabbage Island. I don't think they liked it. There's a place called Cabbage Island in Florida. That's not in Palm Beach, just like outside Palm Beach by a while. But I couldn't find Long Cabbage Island, so I was really confused. The 616 Island Drive, and I had to confirm it. Gregory and Janice Holloway sold it. Financed were the sellers, and financed the sale with $500,000 purchase money mortgage. I don't know what that means. The home was built in 1954. Indeed, all of the homes in the area were built in 1954, including Jeffrey Epstein's Palm Beach house. Right. Okay, so I want to explain something to people there. We're talking about El Brillo Way, and we're talking about Stan Pottinger, and Stan Pottinger is in 616 Island Drive. So we know that here we are, El Brillo Way. This here, we're on Google Earth, of course, and it's showing us Jeffrey Epstein's mansion that's in El Brillo Way. You'll notice Tarpon Island there too. Do you see Tarpon Island? The guy who owns Tarpon Island, I can't remember his name. Oh, well, it's always like that. I can't feel it's Damien something or Darren something. Anyway, he is the one who buys Jeffrey Epstein's house a few years back, and demolishes it and has it rebuilt, and sells it on. So that's the guy who owns Tarpon Island there. This one by here. Over here, it's about here, I think, is Stanley Pottinger's house. Is the Island Drive. And from between, as you see, the scale 100 meters. Can you see that?
Yeah, so it's literally like...
It's about 500 meters.
Wow.
And I think I've measured it out, 500 meters from Jeffrey Epstein's house to Stanley Pottinger's house.
So they're basically neighbors.
Basically neighbors, yes, in many different ways. This is his... this is Jeffrey Epstein's El Brillo Way mansion here. This was designed by a guy called John Volk. This is some interesting stuff. We'll get to this. Give me just one moment. Ooh, see what I got. I'm missing something.
It's funny seeing that Google Earth view of like all the mansions, because they were kind of like really not stacked on top of each other, but very sort of squeezed in, but they're all so huge.
Yeah.
It's just like a billionaire's playground. Like,
well, look at how Palm Beach works. This is all down here. It is all big mansions, and this central bit by here is where all of the rich folk live. So you can see how it is.
Terrible if there was a big flood right there.
Oh, would it be? Is terrible the word? But that's where this house of horror was. That's where his house of horror was. I mean, it can't. If you go down, I think it's about here is. By here is around where the Kennedys resort is as well, where Robert F. Kennedy and other people, Jr. were, and they would visit. He was a visitor to Epstein's house as well.
It does make me laugh as well, like whether it's the Clintons or like Obama or any of these people like that bang on about climate change and rising sea levels and all this stuff, but they've always got like
beachfront mansions,
beachfront properties. That's funny, isn't it?
Yeah, really peculiar. It's like that. It's almost like they don't want you going to the beach. It's almost like they don't want you surfing. Right, I'm going to close this now.
Scam.
Skim. It is a skim. It is a skim, most definitely. So as you see, Epstein, and we'll see more details of this. Same true for Epstein's beachfront property, 358, sorry, Albrilla Way, which he bought for in 1990 for 2.5 million. 2.5 million. In actual fact, we can go back to 1990 and we can have a look at where in May 1990, Martha A. Gottfried, who represents a load of different, I think she represents more than her own agency, originally is doing an open house at Albrilla Way. And this is in the Palm Beach Daily News. We can also see that on March the 4th, 1990, on Palm Beach Daily News, there's another open house here. Here's one up there for Albrilla Way, but this is the one we want. Martha A. Gottfried Inc., again, is trying to sell it, and she's having trouble selling it. Down here, though, is Stanley Pottinger's house, 616 Island Drive, which is also an open house in the same newspaper, being sold by the same people at the same time. So Stanley Pottinger and Jeffrey Epstein may have just been wandering around together, and they would have known each other. So maybe they would have said, "Hey, you buying a house in Palm Beach?" Yeah. Hey, Stan, how's it doing? I'm okay. You know, what are you doing, Stan? Oh, just covering up whatever I can find. What's that over there? It's a hole. I might go and cover it up. You know, can't stop myself. What are you doing, Jeff? Oh, well, I go around, you know, having massages and sexually assaulting. Oh, what's that?
Maybe you could come over to my house and cover some things up round of mine.
Yeah, maybe if you're done with those children, Jeff, I could put them in the hole like you want me to, because I'm sure that probably happened as well. I'm serious there. I'm probably, you know, it gets dark. Some of this stuff, we're looking at stuff and we're having a good time. It's fun because we know the dynamics of it and it's been worn out of our heads. But I'm sure there's other stuff. There's other stuff that we are to learn. But like I say, look at this. March 1990, there is open houses of Albrilla Way, Stanley Pottinger's future home that he's going to buy very soon, and Jeffrey Epstein's future home that he's going to buy very soon. And that's quite amazing. Actually, eventually, Martha Gottfried loses the contract to sell 358 Albrilla Way, and Sotheby's International Realty, which is, of course, attached to Sotheby's Auction House, where Les Wexner is one of the board members alongside Taubman, who's one of the Mega Group guys. And here you go. There's down there is 358 Albrilla Way. This is Jeffrey Epstein's future house, lakefront contemporary. Kathy Shapiro is selling. I wonder if she's any relation to Ben. Unlikely. I reckon there's probably a lot of Shapiros around. But anyway, that would explain why Epstein got such a marked discount on it, because as you see down here, has it got a price on it down here? No, but they're selling it for about 3.25 million or something like that. He ends up getting it for 2.5 million. So that's that's one hell of a markdown. 750 grand. Yeah, that's something like that. So again, there's Sotheby's then selling it over here. And I'm sure Margaret A. Gottfried is probably still selling 616 Island Drive up here. So now they're separated. She's lost the contract to try and sell that. It's gone over to Sotheby's. Not a surprise. And there it is. It was actually 850,000 because it was 3,350,000 that it was. And demolition begins on Epstein's former Palm Beach property eventually. And there you go. Todd Michael Glaser. He's the guy who owns the house in the middle as well, the Tarpon Island one or whatever it's called. He buys it, and there's Jeff. He buys it and then has it pulled down. And Forbes write this meaningless. I mean, come on, how much do they pay this woman, Emma Reynolds, to write such a crap article? Look how small that is. It's barely anything.
Yeah.
There's loads of information you can write about that. I know that I'm writing like articles with like between 7,000 and 10,000 words, and that might be a bit daunting for some people, but that is pathetic, and these people get actually paid for what they do.
It said the article was older than 2 years old. I thought it actually said this article could be read by a 2-year-old, and I said, well, obviously there's nothing there.
I thought you were going to say this article has been written by a 2-year-old. It could be true, right? Paradise Island. I want to mention here quickly. Paradise Island was Hog Island once upon a time, and was bought by this man who I once wrote this article about this year. I think it was, when was it? March. So not that long ago. I wrote the original Jeffrey Epstein about the man who made Paradise Island and many other things, did lots of other things. And he was exactly into the same age range of girls, had intelligence links, house in Palm Beach, house in New York, house in London, house in Paris, all of the same things as Jeffrey Epstein, like mimicked his life, except he got away with all of his crimes. This guy, this is George Huntington Hartford II, who was an heir to the A&P grocery store fortune, which was the first ever chain grocery store in America. So you can imagine how much money they originally made from getting that, like being the first chain grocery store in America. But he was basically retarded. But what's interesting is that Paradise Island, the place where he actually created, was designed by John Volk, the same person who designed Jeffrey Epstein's home in Palm Beach. And I just found that fantastically interesting synchronicity again. There's lots of synchronicity within this piece.
I have to get him in to design all the network of underground tunnels and dungeons, obviously.
Special soundproof holding cabinets for screaming children when the authorities come round. You're
talking about this guy keeping history alive. At the site he designed in Palm Beach, architect's life honored with the Volk Walk. So in Palm Beach, you can go on the Volk Walk because he actually designed thousands of houses, including many that are in Palm Beach. And you can go on a walk and look at all of his different architecture, because there he is. But yeah, he was personally brought on board to design Huntington Hartford's Island, and he had designed Jeffrey Epstein's home too. But it had been built in 1954, so it's not like Jeffrey Epstein got him directly to do it. But it's very interesting that synchronicity exists. I like a bit of synchronicity. And 616, eventually that was sold off, and 616 Island Drive, which would also be sold for 2.5 million, were not so much of a markdown as you see, because it was being sold for 2,950,000, was also up for sale. Here is on the 27th of May, still up for sale. And here it is on the 22nd of July, where they have an open house between 2 and 4, and on that day Stanley Pottinger would walk in and buy the house directly that day. In actual fact, that can be basically proven by this entity that was created, a Florida profit corporation called Colt Communications Inc., which was registered, the date filed, it said, this is from a filing from 1990, and you'll see that on another filing, there you go. So the effective date, so even though the date filed was the 26th of July 1990, he backdated this corporation to have been registered there from the day that open house viewing had happened. So obviously that's the moment he bought the house. And here it is, 616 Island Drive, Palm Beach, Florida. And registered agent name of the place was this, and the direct detail was J. Stanley Pottinger, address 616 Island Drive. So we know for sure he lived 500 meters away from Jeffrey Epstein. At the same time, Jeffrey Epstein moved in to his home, and Stanley Pottinger moved his family in there too. So that means Matthew Pottinger knew him as well. Matthew Pottinger knew him well. And Matthew Pottinger is Stanley Pottinger's son, and we'll get to him shortly. And he is Pottinger in 1995. I thought it'd be worth seeing it. It's linked up in the article as well. This is him on the Charlie Rose show in April 1995.
Similar kind of hairdo to Epstein. You know?
Yeah. Well, they all had that kind of. I think it's the Council on Foreign Relations fro.
Yeah.
Or the Council on Foreign Relations.
I mean, they were practically neighbours. They worked in the same office. Maybe they're the same hairdresser.
Yeah, they did. I really George Bush cut. Let's call him that. Anyway,
I want a good haircut. I want to get all the girls. Just like Jeffrey. Jeffrey's always got the girls. I want the haircut like Jeffrey. You want the Jeffrey haircut, sir? Yes.
Okay, get out the semen. Oh God, not again. Right, anyway, let's leave Stanley's semen slick hair behind. And in 1996, after his release, so I'd gone back a bit in time to show you the purchase of the property where he was registered. So he had two properties. He had this Twin Lakes property in Salem, South Salem, near New York, and he had the Palm Beach property 500 meters away from Jeffrey Epstein. I still like when I'm. You've got to understand. I've just researched nearly every single part of this case, yeah, and that was one of the last pieces of information I found. Was like Jeffrey Epstein lived 500 meters away from him at the same time. I just couldn't believe it. People had told me that he hadn't moved in that day and all of this, they were, it was like everything was leading me away from finding that information. And I still find it amazing. That's just amazing. They were neighbors. 1996, or a year after he becomes a best-selling author, his mother, Eleanor Chittenden, who's got remarried to James D. Chittenden, used to be married to John P. Pottinger as Dayton City Commissioner. As we know, the fourth city commissioner to die in office during his time, until his death at the age of 49 in 1948. And J. Stanley Pottinger is noted there. But as you'll notice as well, David Forbes Pottinger of Hawaii there. And also Paul Pottinger, who I've not picked on at all. Paul's got away with it all. Yeah. I bet you he's the worst one as well. He's down in somewhere going, yeah. You haven't got me. You bastard, you. Well, anyway, so she died. I thought it'd be worth noting that. She comes up, of course. I mean, these things come up in the Pottinger Identity, David Forbes and stuff. So maybe that's why I put it up there. Who knows? But anyway, we're on to his books, and we're going to move forward now because we got a lot to do, and this is going to get really interesting. We're going to start to go fast. So, Fourth Procedure was his first book, Stanley Pottinger's first book, and Slow Burning was his second book. It doesn't say a date there. Was that? No.
So with the Statue of Liberty's head on fire?
Yeah. Liberty slowly burning. I
mean, he's got some front putting out a message like that.
Wait till the last
Here's
one.
The justice,
Wait till I swear someone's taking it away. Oh, it's me.
Lady Liberty might as well be burning right now. And I'm just sick of the injustice. It's like, wow. Okay.
It's completely unbelievable. And it's the line, the full tagline of his last book is really intriguing.
It's he thinks of himself as like an Ian Fleming.
Yeah. Yes. Christmas Eve in Auschwitz, 1944. Hitler's Angel of Death, Dr. Joseph Mengele, and his brilliant young protege, Adelwulf, are on the verge of a nightmarish medical discovery. When the war begins, it all to an end. But Mengele's insane vision for the Third Reich lives on. So he's really like invoking all of the same old stuff in his books as well, isn't he? The Last Nazi. I mean, you know what they're all about. This is his last book. This is his last book. 2005 is originally brought out, and then it's reprinted in 2006 because I think they made a mistake. And can you see what it says on the cover there? Let's see if we can get close to it, and we can barely get close to it.
Yeah, what's the strap line for this? The boss.
Success always comes at a price, but there's an extra tagline on most of them, which says, "What's your price?" or something along those lines.
Right,
and
okay.
It's very Stan Pottinger, isn't it?
His last two books, man, they was like, so the last Nazi is his dad, and the boss is him. So he's writing about his family, really.
Yeah, maybe.
Just the front to be like, I'm gonna, like he thought he could do everything that he's done, and then at the end of it all, I'll just be a best-selling author writing about all this stuff. Like,
you get away with it.
I can't believe the front of some people, really.
Yeah, he's got front galore. I mean, all these people, the only way you can be a fixer at this level is at being all front and no soul.
You think he would just keep a low profile, is what I'm saying. Like, but he's still, no, I still want to be someone. I still want to be a best-selling author. Like, okay.
We're entering into different times now, though. We're getting along and we've moved forward. It's no longer the 90s, my friend. We're in the noughties. The millennium has happened. And at the time when he's releasing his last book, the one we were just looking at, The Boss, he releases it in 2005, but then re-releases it in 2006 for some reason. So I don't know what happened with it. I never worked that out, so I think it was just a decision. Maybe it was just too many errors in it or something, or they decided to change a bit. But anyway, the same year, 2005, there was something coming out, and it's interesting that this was one of his last books. That he wrote the last book, and then he stopped writing afterwards. And I think that's partially because he got forced back into this stuff, and I think he had a little bit of an urge from it, probably from stuff like this. So this is the Washington Post recording, which isn't a surprise. As I mentioned Bernstein earlier, the other person was Bob Woodward, who was reporting for the Washington Post on the Watergate stuff. And they were meeting Deep Throat, the infamous Deep Throat, regularly, and Deep Throat was giving them information, secret information. And later on, Bob Woodward wrote this book in 2005 called The Secret Man, and he reveals that W. Mark Felt, who was a deputy director of the FBI, I think he was at that time. Does it say down here? But anyway, he was deputy director of the FBI, was basically the person who was Deep Throat. And it was revealed by Woodward that Pottinger found this out at the time and hid it. So it says that, writes that he learned in 1976 from Assistant Attorney General Stan Pottinger that Felt, who had been the number 2 man at the FBI, had given himself away by testifying before a grand jury. Asked, "Were you Deep Throat?" Felt initially said no, but a stunned look alerted Pottinger to the possibility that he was lying. The Secret Man contains no major revelations. Deep Throat's identity was revealed in a Vanity Fair article a month ago. So nice that Woodward keeps to the rules. And Woodward has already written the story of how Washington Post, in the Washington Post, of how Felt became his famous secret source. But the book adds numerous revealing details to a well-known story. Let me see. So in that grand jury proceeding, Woodward writes, Pottinger quietly reminded Felt that he was under oath. He then offered to withdraw the question as irrelevant to the subject of investigation, which was illegal break-ins conducted by the FBI in pursuit of anti-war radicals from the Weather Underground. Felt quickly accepted the offer. Pottinger told Woodward, who didn't confirm his conclusion, that he would keep the knowledge to himself. To his eternal credit, Woodward writes, he did just that. Now, that is extremely interesting, isn't it? 1976, the man who's tasked with covering up Watergate discovers who Deep Throat is and claims, and covers it up, but says he offered to withdraw the question as irrelevant to the subject of investigation. And could there be anything more relevant than the person who had all of the information when you're interviewing that person and they were part of the FBI? That is a cover-up in process. That's a cover-up in happening. So they're saying, Mark Felt got discovered as being deep throat a month before this book came out, so it's okay. But why wasn't it discovered in 1976? Obviously, it should have been outed in 1976, and it should have been in proper investigation, and everybody would have known what was going on. But Pottinger was back then the fix-it man. He was put in charge of these cases for a reason. He was to make sure that nothing come back on the government, hardly anything. So this is a perfect example of how in real time Pottinger covered up parts of Watergate and stopped justice from being done by saying that something that was extremely relevant to the case was irrelevant to the subject of investigation. It was the most relevant thing that you could possibly find to the subject of the investigation. So that's not just a little bit away, completely away. So you can see Pottinger's being revealed by this point, and he stops being an author all of a sudden. As these things come out, he stops being an author. He starts. So here we go. What's this? On the job, medical killer, my old man. Let's see. So this is them talking about him in 2005 about Pottinger. But this is an important thing that happens during from 2005 and 2006. This is the indictment against Jeffrey Epstein for the first case against him, and this is a game changer. Eventually, this would bring John Stanley Pottinger to have to come back onto the scene, and we're about to discover. I mean, let me explain something to everybody beforehand. This is so enormous. This case is so enormous. It's so dangerous. It's going to blow up. At some point, they can't cover up things for this amount of time. Back then, they had people like Stanley Pottinger and others. Yeah, they could cover things up. Don't want to distract you with Heather Mills McCartney. Let's go back onto that page. They could they could cover things up back in the day, and they could, for instance, Pottinger could say that's irrelevant to the court, and you won't find out about it for another 30 years. So that's a perfect example of that. 30 years that cover-up will last. Nowadays, cover-ups don't last that long. Damn, nowadays, if they put a propaganda, like, for instance, the Wagner army are coming to take over Russia, a week before, Putin's going to fall, a week later, and they're saying, Putin's now strengthened in his position, and none of it was real. So, it's like things fall apart quicker now because of the way media works and how savvy people have become. And people knew where this was going. Slowly, as the Epstein case got revealed, everybody who was involved in it know their part would be revealed eventually. Whether it's not at the first hurdle or the second hurdle or the third hurdle, those hurdles will be high. Those first hurdles will be really high, and this was the first hurdle. 2005, 2006, the investigations began after that little girl told her mum and her dad, and I feel sad about it. I feel really sad. I feel like this is the moment when they could have stopped a load more. They could have stopped They could have done the right thing. This is the moment. This is the crossroads of the truth. And what happened in the first investigation and first case is even though the initial investigating officer, I believe, was well-meaning, it all got swallowed up to the point where Jeffrey Epstein got 12 months in prison with a sweetheart deal where he was allowed to leave the door open and leave whenever he wants. He set up a non-profit organization and an office where he could go and work for himself every day.
In prison.
Yeah.
It's just not prison,
well, not,
is it?
Yeah.
He donated various large sums of money to the prison just before for all of these things to be made to happen. So this is just like, we know he did not. And they were careful. They only, I think it was about I can't remember how many counts it was at the start, but it wasn't many. But they mentioned a New York residence and a Palm Beach residence, and that would mean that he would have to register if convicted as a sex offender in wherever he is. So in this indictment, it's saying in particular from at least in or around 2002 up until and including at least around 2005, but this was still the beginning of the investigation. And during this time, Stanley Pottinger is elsewhere. Stanley Pottinger, as this case is developing, because Epstein is not jailed until 2009. Okay, so we got a while. We got 3 years in between that, 4 years from when he started getting investigated to when he goes to jail and has that sweetheart deal. And in between, Pottinger's still doing stuff. In one place, he's meeting with a guy called Jason Epstein, which I thought was quite funny, near around the time that Epstein was arrested. But in this, Pottinger, and this is really important for the future as well, Pottinger is turning up at this. It's an event that was, I think it was for the returning serviceman. Bob Woodruff. The newsman became a champion of the cause after he was nearly killed by a roadside bomb while working in Iraq last year. So they were reporting from Iraq. Bob Woodruff, a roadside bomb hit the van. He claims he was nearly killed, and so they put on these gigs that were for military personnel who were returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. And here's a quote from Stan: "To see New Yorkers turn out like this for a military is really touching," said Stan Pottinger, whose son Matt just finished a tour of Iraq's Anbar province. Now, they make a slight quick mention of Stan Pottinger, but they don't mention who he is or anything. And Matthew Pottinger, became Deputy National Security Advisor under Trump in 2017 and has many tales of espionage already under his belt, even though he tries to dress them up as other things. And he will come up in a future article. I promise you that. Matthew Pottinger, I make a note of him here. I make a note of him on purpose. But we're going to go forward to 2014. Yeah. Here we go. This book. Bradley J. Edwards is also one of the lead lawyers alongside Stanley Pottinger. In actual fact, they set up their own legal firm together called Edwards Pottinger. Edwards claims in this book to be dumb, and at the same time notes that Stanley Pottinger is obviously a spy working for the CIA. So that leads to massive questions. Last month, now this article, the people involved in this article, some of them have known what's coming for a while. I've known this for a bit. Last month, Edwards Pottinger split. And this is like really important stuff because that's Edwards distancing himself from Pottinger just before the story breaks.
So the company split.
Yeah. So Pottinger left. I don't know. It's become something else. It was about June the 3rd, June the 4th. I looked on the Wayback Machine was the last time that I can find that it was Edwards Pottinger. So it was last month that it split, and I'm not surprised it was going to split. They knew it was one of the legal team that I was investigating. In actual fact, some of the people involved in this have put up a campaign of disinformation and to try and also tried to basically say the same things that they think were going to be in the article. I think so they could co-opt it and say, oh, well, I knew this beforehand, but they hadn't explained how they knew it. It was just they were involved, intimately involved. So there's a lot of this going on at the moment. It's a very strange time in my world because I'm right touching the Epstein case here. I've been in touch with Epstein victims. I've talked with various people involved in the case. I've helped write the book on the case. I've written massive articles on the case. I feel really deeply involved in this now. But that I'm looking for number 26. That's what I'm looking for. So we are going to explore this. We're in chapter 26, and he calls it "Whose Side Are You On?" And he calls it that for a good reason, because he's introducing how he met Stanley Pottinger. Wow. So he's talking about his meeting with Virginia. I provided Virginia Roberts information to the FBI on July the 5th, 2013. FBI agents interviewed her at United States Consulate General for Sydney, Australia, to inquire about her time with Jeffrey Epstein. The interview sparked something in Virginia that she had tried for years to suppress. In the summer of 2014, she moved back to the United States. She did this because of how important the CVRA case was to her. She felt compelled to go to come home and to fight not just for herself, but for all of Epstein's victims. She didn't know Courtney, but she loved what Courtney stood for and wanted to join in. So, 2014, Virginia returns, gets Bradley Edwards on board, meets with him. Shortly after our meeting, I received an entirely unexpected telephone call. I was at home, in bed, at 11:30 on Friday night when my phone rang. As soon as I said hello, the voice on the other end went into a wind-up that eventually became familiar. "Let me introduce myself," the caller said. "My name is Stan Pottinger. I'm sure you get loads of crazy calls about this subject matter, Jeffrey Epstein. But hear me out. I have a civil rights practice in New York. Before that, I was Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division at the Justice Department in Washington. In addition to my own current work, I sometimes work on cases with David Bowies. I've been contacted to represent one of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, and I have told David about it. We understand that you're an expert. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. I'm calling to see if it makes sense to work together." This is unexpected for me. I wanted to know how Stanley Pottinger first entered into the case against Jeffrey Epstein, and to find his legal partner explain it in a way that I exactly expected it to be, which is
turned up.
Just turns up out of the blue. He says, "Hey, my name's Stan. Now, I've done all of these things, but I can sort it out for you. I can sort all of this out for you." This is what he does. He's Stan the man. You know, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So I asked him whether he represented a client who was victimized in New York or Florida, and he told me Florida. I then told him I would keep it in confidence, but if he said the name of the victim, I would probably know her situation. When he identified the victim, I walked out on the balcony of my room and explained, "I'm not sure where you got your case from, but you have a problem. Your client was represented in the previous underlying litigation, and while she may not have liked her attorney, not me, or the representation she received, I know for a fact that she signed a settlement agreement with Jeffrey Epstein already." Stan explained that this was not his understanding, but he would check it out and get back to me the next day. His call set off a bunch of suspicions for me that something was wrong. Surely, I got a call from him around the next night, but I have forgotten to tell him that midnight on a weekend was not my preferred time to talk. But I stayed on the line. This time here, his approach was slightly different. In the past 24 hours, he said, he had confirmed what I had told him. He felt confident that I knew all the characters involved here, and if he was going to get involved with this litigation, working with me was probably the best way for him and his colleagues to go. I didn't know Stan, but I knew David Bowies by reputation and found the thought of working with him intriguing. He was actually one of the lawyers who had unknowingly helped shape my legal career. When I returned to Florida from my time studying abroad in the Czech Republic after my first year of law school, I had 3 weeks to kill before going back for my second year. My dad hooked me up with a law firm clerkship through a fishing buddy of his who had an admiralty lawyer in Jacksonville, who was an admiralty lawyer in Jacksonville. Having hired me only as a favor, the firm made it clear to me that on my first day that considering my lack of skills, they had no use for me, but wanted to help me out. They asked what kind of law I wanted to practice. I told them I wanted to be a trial lawyer. They told me that there was a guy trying a case down the street for the next 3 weeks, and they said they would pay me if I wanted to go to court and watch him. I went to the trial and sat in the back of Jacksonville courtroom that was filled with stacks of bankers' boxes. David Bowies represented an electricity company called Florida Light and Power, which was contract dispute. I was the first person to arrive at the courtroom every day and watched everything he did for 3 weeks. So he talks about knowing Stan Pottinger and having experienced David Bowies. Now, David Bowies is a Bowies-Schiller Flexner, which I believe was created in 1997. Yeah, there you go. Chairman and managing director of Bowies-Schiller Flexner since its founding in 1997. And oh my God, did he have some big cases throughout that time, whether or not we're going to get on to the early ones. I think we are. Now, here in 1991 to 1993, this is the first thing that piques my interest. It says he's the counsel for Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, recovering $1.2 billion from companies who sold junk bonds to failed savings and loans associations. Now, when I first read that, I thought, no, not Drexel Burnham Lambert, though. He's not talking about that, because if he was involved in like one of the biggest like sort of Ponzi scheme sort of things, junk bond selling of crap in history, that would be crazy. What, David Bowies did that? Is that what he did? And yes, it was exactly that. So here's the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation that he was working for during the time, and here you go. FDIC RTC filed $6 billion lawsuit against Michael Milken, other Drexel and thrift industry officials over junk bond losses. And here is the filings by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation and the Resolution Trust Corporation. What's really interesting is these corporations ended up being the biggest liability that Drexel, Burnham Lambert had. So they actually had a dog in the fight, which was extremely strange. I think it shows it in this document doesn't look like it's working very well, does it? I think it shows it in this document. That's what would consist of lawyers from the FDIC. In fact, we believe that the FDIC and RTC may be among the largest creditors in the Drexel bankruptcy. So it's interesting that they themselves are then dealing with the Drexel bankruptcy like that. Now, the next case that Bowies is involved in, he's involved in two cases. He's involved in the Microsoft case, which is the antitrust litigation, or whatever it's called, fraud litigation against Microsoft and Bill Gates. And that was very famous because it was a really hard one to win, because, of course, Bill Gates brings out all his lawyers, and David Bowies won that. But he also represented Al Gore when Al Gore challenged the Florida again election results in 2000 that saw George H.W. Bush take the presidency, and then the war on terror began. And that was all based upon hanging chads. That was the voting things that people showed their intentions to vote. But if it was just like dipped down a little bit, was that an intention, or was that an accident? Could that be? So that was what the hanging chad was. No, I will not learn more. But David Bowies did other things. He's a really interesting person to go and look into. Let me come out of that. So,
there he is.
Yeah, there he is.
Another wrong'un.
Another wrong'un. And who represented Harvey Weinstein? Of course, David Bowies firm. And they got some badass people. Wait a minute, where's the next firm? Oh, okay, get out of the way. Here you go. On July the 11th, 2017, this is in the New Yorker, Harvey Weinstein's attorney, David Bowies of law firm Bowie Schiller Flexner LLP, signed a contract with Black Cube, an Israeli private intelligence agency operated by former members of Israel's Mossad intelligence service. Black Cube have actually broken one of my computers, and I want the money back personally. The contract describes Black Cube's tactics and goals in its work for its clients, identified in other documents as Weinstein. The firm's first objective, as stated in the contract, was to uncover information that would help stop the publication of new negative newspaper stories, which sources said was a New York Times story focused on sexual misconduct allegations against Weinstein. Its second objective was to obtain a manuscript of a book that sources identified as a memoir of actress Rose McGowan, who had accused Weinstein of rape. That's a very interesting one. And David Bowies was, of course, involved in getting, basically, Black Cube, they say former Mossad. They're not, they're Mossad. They're just Mossad. They're just private Mossad. And they're inept, one of the most inept companies in the world, private intelligence companies in the world, completely inept. I found them, their information being leaked in an article. It was hilarious. And then they basically made one of my computers go funky and blow up. So I mean, tit for tat. That's what I say. The contract, which the magazine published on its own website, had as a signatory a Weinstein lawyer, David Bowies, a Democratic Party stalwart who argued for marriage equality at Supreme Court and represented Al Gore in the disputed 2000 presidential elections. Now, it's really important to note that basically they used underhand methods in that, but that was not the only one he used underhand methods in, or weird methods in. David Bowies also represented Theranos, and Theranos was a weird one. This was where this woman, who is a 19-year-old student, claimed that basically, Elizabeth Holmes claimed that she had created a way to test blood samples at a much lower rate. You only needed a droplet of blood, and they would be able to test for everything. But it turned out it was all a lie. She tricked everybody. She tricked all of the people who worked for her company. She tricked all of the board. I don't believe she tricked everybody, but that's what they say. And she tricked everybody. And David Bowies was set up to represent them after she had already been done. So she was already in loads of trouble. Loads and loads of it. I'm not sure if it shows, it says here quite how much trouble she was in, but she'd already had loads of charges against her by this time. And David Bowies doesn't only go on to legally represent Theranos, but he actually takes a role as a director while he's representing his company who's under fire. Now, who's on the board but senators and Henry Kissinger? So why is Henry Kissinger on the board for Theranos when Theranos is a lie anyway, and David Bowies becomes a director when he's representing them, which makes it a conflict of interest, and none of it makes any sense, and it kind of got like wiped over. Just amazing. So
I mean, everything's just a conflict of interest at every stage of this, isn't it? It just,
yeah,
it's crazy, like that. Every time it just gets completely overlooked.
Yep, completely overlooked. And I think I gotta find the right page. It's hard. It's hard to find the right page in this because I want to find the.
I mean, isn't it just like a hard and fast rule? Like, if there is that type of conflict of interest, then the case will get thrown out. Of it, like the case won't get thrown out, but they have to find, some kind of new legal representative. I mean,
yeah. You would think it would be automatic, wouldn't you? You'd think that that's exactly what they were, but that's not how it was at all.
And there would be some kind of investigation to find that out beforehand.
Yeah.
Well, there wasn't an investigation. It's just the guy that hired it to do the investigation. It's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
They make it look like, don't they? We're always doing the right.
Yeah.
We're doing the right things here. We're going to investigate that. But
who did you get to investigate it? Himself. Like, that's where it always kind of comes down to. Yep.
So, I as you see, even Henry Kissinger. I'm going to go to the article. It's going to be much easier for me to quote of the article. I mentioned that Edwards uses a term, David Bowie's personal 007, to describe Stanley Pottinger throughout his book. And I'm going to say a couple of quotes, for these are taken from his book, to understand the relationship and what happens next. And these are the most important bits. So there's a few of them, but it's very important to the article and understanding what happened. On our second night call, Stan thanked me for my help. So this is the second time that he called. The first one was, hello, my name's Stan, and blah, blah, blah. And he called him back and he has a conversation, says, you were right. I found out that information. And then he goes on to say, Stan thanked me for my help and told me that if anything ever came up, he would like to work with me, and said David Bowie would too. He then asked me if I had anything in the works against Epstein. So I told him a little bit about the current status of the CVR case. This led to a long conversation about the breadth of the criminal enterprise headed by Jeffrey Epstein and my ultimate goal to overturn Epstein's non-prosecution agreement with the feds. I say sick there because he feds is in small letters on them. I would prefer to have it capital. I'm not sure if that's where it does, though. Maybe I'm wrong. He then reminded me that he was a former U.S. Assistant Attorney General, of course he was, and that David and his law firm were well regarded by the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York and around the country. He said, what you're doing is admirable. Your goal to get Epstein prosecuted. But rather than to try to undo this bad deal, referring to the NPA, isn't there anyone you represent who has traveled on Epstein's plane or been abused at any of his other locations? I found the question unnerving, especially given the time of his call and my current talks with Virginia. I'm admittedly quick to be suspicious, but my mind was racing. So I mentioned that he says stuff like, I found it quite unnerving, to set off a bunch of suspicions, because this is how he speaks about his meetings with Stan. And he says, was Stan working with Epstein? Was David? Had Epstein tagged Virginia's passport in order to receive a ping from the Justice Department if she ever entered the country? Despite these thoughts, which were a bit frantic, I told Stan that I had recently been contacted by Virginia Roberts and divulged parts of her story and that had already been made public, but nothing else. A couple of days passed and Stan called again. David and I would like to meet with you. How soon can you fly to New York? I gave him a proposed itinerary. He told me to call him when I landed, and he would tell me where to meet him. Waiting until the last minute to figure out where to have lunch is not an unusual thing for people to do in New York, but given my lurking suspicions, I found it odd. It smelt like an Epstein setup. So he's already saying it out loud, and he's already explaining it.
Yeah.
So he goes to buy a USB drive that can record the conversation secretly from a shop, but ends up all going wrong, apparently. And he ends up having to leave it behind because all electrics have to be left outside by security, I think. So thinking that was headed for a setup, I tried to remember connections I was aware of between Jeffrey Epstein and his friends that might have tied him to David Bowie's law firm. I looked for Alfredo Rodriguez's journal and I couldn't find David. Next, I reviewed copies of message pads that had been confiscated in the trash bills at Epstein's house. I paged through the calls from National Security Advisor Sandy Berger, former United States Senator George Mitchell, and movie producer Harvey Weinstein, more than a decade before he would be arrested on rape charges. I continued flipping through the messages, and then there it was, like he wasn't expecting to find it. A call from David Bowie. According to the message pad, he had called Epstein's house on February 25th, 2005. There was no message associated with the call, only a handwritten note that someone named David Bowie had personally called and left his cell phone number asking that Jeffrey call him back. Was this a benign thing, a return business call to a business call placed by Epstein, or was he, as I feared, Epstein's lawyer, a spy? There was only one way to find out. What way is that, Brad? Oh, he goes to meet them, of course. And there's another set of amazing, sort of narrative put into the book. But basically, I spent most of the lunch interrogating Stan. This is while while he's meeting him up for the first time, about his past and present, making him comfortable until he volunteered that he had known Epstein. So this is Stan Pottinger's business partner talking about his first meeting with Stan, and he's confirming in his own book that he had known Epstein. He had worked with him briefly many years before. Really? Stan explained that after he'd left the Justice Department in Washington, he'd worked as an investment banker in New York. As you see from the records, that's from 1981, he says, onwards, where a client introduced him to Epstein. They were not in the same firm, but the two of them had shared an office for a few weeks. He may have thought he was being candid and forthcoming, but all it did was ramp up my suspicions. And of course, I then note that this is the period he's described. This is the time where he's smuggling guns in arms in Iran with Cyrus Hashemi and Jamal Adnan Khashoggi. Nearly did it there.
Epstein.
It's unbelievable.
I think I've heard of him. I think.
Do you say Jason Epstein? I know. Oh, no. Jonathan Epstein. Is that one? I know him. No. Oh, Jackie Epstein. You must be talking about him. Yeah, he knows all the Epstein.
It's crazy that it's just in black and white in his book. Like, he's admitting they knew each other. They even shared an office.
It gets worse.
It feels like he's just trying to take a step back and say,
"Yeah,
I didn't know any of this."
Yeah, like acting like he's a legal professional. He knows everything. He knows all about the law. He knows what he's doing wrong. He knows what a conflict of interest is. And still, I asked if David knew Jeffrey, and Stan said, as far as he knew, the answer was no. At this point, Stan really wasn't doing anything to dispel my concerns, since I knew that in the past, David had left a private message for Jeffrey to call him. Stan wanted to talk about Epstein, but I delayed that. When we finished eating, I told Stan it didn't make much sense for me to explain things twice, once to him and once to David. So why didn't we ask David to come join us? Stan suggested instead that we go to David's office. I got my backpack and we jumped in a cab to 575 Lexington Avenue. But this merely raised another red flag. David's office was in the same building as Jeffrey Epstein's main attorney, Darren Indyke. Oh, I mean, really? What the hell? So I asked, what do you think? This is later, right? So he goes and he meets with them, and it is honestly, if you read the book yourself, and it's a shame that anybody has to read Relentless Pursuit, but you go, what the hell is this? This is a circle jerk, and he's pretending, and he's driving across to Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer's building, where he's gonna just be like co-opted right at the start of the case. I mean, that's what they did in 2009. The 2009 case, right at the start, they started co-opting everybody, and Darren Indyke and other were doing that. And the start of the second case, they started doing it exactly again. And it got to a point where Pottinger and Edwards was so suspicious of Pottinger, they decided to set up a business with him. So I asked, oh, God, I nearly tipped everything over. So I asked, what do you think about the idea of having a New York office and asking Stan Pottinger if he wants to be my law partner? He's saying this to Bethany Henderson, I think Henderson, and the other one, the girls who work with him. Both reacted almost immediately with reasons why they thought it would be a great fit. But look, Stan, in my view, was David Bowie's personal 007. Not that either of them would put it that way, but I did. I thought that there was a pretty good chance that my proposition could make Stan laugh, though he'd be too diplomatic to do that out loud. I mean, who was I kidding? But I didn't have much time to game the idea. My old firm was winding down fast, and I was trying to do a million things to get a new one started. It took Stan no time to say, I'm in. David Bowie said had told him long ago that forming a small firm had many appealing advantages and tempted virtually all lawyers at one time or another. That's such a Stan Pottinger line. And yeah, so that's extremely interesting. Let's come out of that now.
I love the fact that like you made the joke about, he's so suspicious of this guy and his agenda that he decides to start a business with him. It just doesn't make any sense.
No, it's because it is exactly what you're saying. He's trying to make himself look like, oh, I was suspicious and I don't understand. And there was all of these different things. And I was like, and then he does the complete opposite that you would do if that was true.
Yeah.
So it's pretty obvious it wasn't true. Well, what's interesting on the Miami Herald here, if you notice, they got David Bowie's. They talk about David Bowie's, and then they put Stan Pottinger, and they put someone else's face on Stan. They put a wrong person on Stan Pottinger. That's interesting. And this is like the Miami Herald. You think the Miami Herald would know what they do?
Wow.
They could at least put a fake picture on the printed
Who is
version.
this other guy?
Yeah.
I know. Who is the other guy? Well, it's probably Schiller or Flexner or one of those, maybe. But it certainly isn't David Bowie's. And this was when things were starting to get. I mean, they were fighting. Where are we going on this? This is the second part. Here we go. Epstein's case brings renewed intensity to legal titans' war. So understand what's going on as well with the Jeffrey Epstein case. It's not just about David Bowie's. He's like one of the biggest lawyers in the country. Stan Pottinger is one of the biggest fixers in the country. Alan Dershowitz is on the other side, yeah? And Alan Dershowitz is a star lawyer of the highest order. He can go into a courtroom. You may not like how he looks. You may not like how he acts. You may not like his nature and what he does. But damn, that guy is an amazing lawyer. You know, that guy really knows how to lawyer it up, you know, proper. And they need to get rid of him off the case. And so they start basically, Alan Dershowitz and his integrity is tested the entire time. As people say, he admits like, oh, I had a massage with my wife at Epstein's. And it is known that Epstein's, if you went to Epstein's, if you had a massage, not every massage was an actual like topless one-hand shandy or whatever you want to call it. In actual fact, majority of businessmen and stuff would like lie there and probably have massages. And if you're offered, can you imagine you go around a rich person's house and they say, oh, while you're here, do you want to have a massage from a professional masseuse? It's like, I would be like, yeah, all right, then straight on, towel around me, etc. Now, where that, what level that took and how that was enacted so that they could compromise people is another thing. But at this time, everything becomes focused at Alan Dershowitz and getting him off the case. And you could see why. And it's noted in Miami Herald, Dershowitz versus Bowie. Epstein case brings renewed intensity to legal war between titans. You know, really, that's what it is. It becomes a bit of a battle between Bowie and Dershowitz. They talk about it in the Miami Herald. Yeah, that's that article. And it's pretty awesome. Right. Now, avert your eyes. Try not to look. There's nudity on the screen. Thank God it's a painting. It's a very good painting in actual fact, isn't it?
Oh, very good.
So we're entering into a different pace in this article and in this series. We're at the Take Home a Nude 2006 New York Academy of Art. This is something that's gone on 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, and 2011. They started to do it in Sotheby's, I think. And it's basically a load of artists. The New York Academy of Art's annual Take Home a Nude benefit art auction aids the Academy. Oh, let me just hide all my bits. The New York Academy of Art's annual Take Home a Nude benefit art auction aids Academy scholarships and educational programs. This year's live and silent auction featured more than 200 paintings, drawings, photographs, and sculptures by well-known artists, as well as Academy's most talented students, faculty, and alumni, sponsored by Ellie Tahari, who I think we'll see a picture of her later. And it shows a little gallery. There's a little gallery. We're in the Wayback Machine here, so not all of the pictures. If I was going to the gallery, we're not going to see all of the pictures. But here we have a nice screen capture, and this screen capture was taken in 2007, August the 29th. And this page is actually 21 captures of this page, so it goes back to CCC 2006, which is the date of the Take Home a Nude, just before that. And you see there's a lot of artists, there's a few trustees and board of trustees, and we're on this page for a very good reason. In 2019, as this whole thing with Stan, David Bowie's, and the man Bradley Edwards.
Edwards.
Yeah, when these guys were all doing their thing later on and starting something up, well, they were also meeting with someone else. They were Stanley Pottinger and Brad Edwards would go to meet another supposed Epstein victim who had worked for Epstein once upon a time, called Maria Farmer. Now, some people out there have claimed that I was on a crusade against Maria Farmer, yet I hadn't said anything yet. And the reason why people would think that I'm on a crusade against Maria Farmer, yet I haven't said anything about her yet, was because Maria Farmer was telling everybody that I was on a crusade against her because she knew that I knew a load of things that weren't right. And she knew that I was in contact with a load of people who used to be in contact with her, who she had messaged over and over again, and she had formed close relationships and bonds with, something that she does before she systematically breaks those relationships and bonds, it seems. And I have to say, I might come out of the screen share for this little tiny bit by here. I might come out to here and talk about this a little bit, because I've got to say quickly before I start with the next bit, I never expected to be here. I thought Maria Farmer was just straight as it comes. I thought she was the most inspiring person, the way she spoke, the way she acted. I felt blessed to have known her at one point. I felt like she was really, like, the way she spoke, she was always so positive, and she was also always so nice. But that's how she was to everybody until she wasn't. And then she's becomes a completely the opposite thing. And this has happened to multiple people. So I'm actually I got a bit of a growing support group of people who class themselves as, probably best way to put it, victims of Maria Farmer. And Maria Farmer systematically from 2019 has entered into mainly the people doing the independent research on Jeffrey Epstein, and has systematically befriended or talked to most of them. And the majority of interviews she does now, it gets really freaky. It gets really freaky. Started off in 2019 with interviews with Whitney Webb and Jason Bourmas that went really big, and she said some stuff in there which was edgy. But everybody was like, "Oh, she's one of the victims speaking out, and Epstein's definitely a criminal, so she's definitely a victim." Yes, go Maria Farmer. You know, everybody felt like that. And then over the years, basically, she befriended lots of people who felt like that about her. And she had them do jobs for her and do things for her that suited her, and help her out in loads of different ways. And then each of them, systematically, she turned on them. And she made them feel really bad, really, really bad. Some of them she had convinced of things that are really personal. And so I went on a kind of a journey at one point because, and for the people who don't understand how this started, well, Maria Farmer wanted somebody to go on the Unlimited Hangout podcast, and I was asked by Whitney Webb to check out this person. I checked out this person. He had 7 to 8 false identities. He had a load of fraud convictions, and he was not the person he said he was. And Maria Farmer was sure that he was, and I couldn't understand it. And she was trying to put him out to everybody, every single person on the independent media. She was trying to get this one person to go out, and I won't say his name because I won't give him any fuel. Because it's an operation. It's clearly an operation, like so clearly an operation. This person that she tried to put me in contact with, she had tried to have go on the Unlimited Hangout web podcast and other podcasts as well. This person not only has convictions and frauds, but I have had experience where people from all sides of this, from the Epstein accusers to the Epstein defenders, and the allies of Epstein, I've had them all try and put me in contact with the same person. It's coming from both sides. And it made me realize that all of the side was the same side. In actual fact, all of these people are all separate individuals who are all trying to find the best way to make the most out of their situation in the limelight of the Epstein case. And it's a strange limelight, it is. But by 2019, the newspapers were not only not to be trusted by most people, but most of their coverage on Epstein was just repetitive nonsense. And they were just trying to focus on certain allegations that were, they were salacious and wonderful and interesting, but they weren't necessarily completely true or evidence-based. They were what had been seeded into the narrative. So I've had to follow back and find out who Maria Farmer was, because Maria Farmer, within one day, she was one of my heroes. The next day, someone I know was being tagged in emails to her solicitors where she was saying I was homophobic because I didn't want this person to go on the Unlimited Hangout podcast. And it wasn't like I didn't want this person. It was just I was asked to verify this person. And I was just bizarre. It went to a campaign of hate, but I had seen her do it to other people, and I kind of knew it was coming eventually. And it was a shock when it happened, but deep down, I'd always felt that it was going to happen. So, like I say, I know a load of people who have been through the same thing, and it's systematic. And in actual fact, what she does now is she goes around, has people put on a podcast, and then within about a week, she's telling those people to delete parts of the podcast, edit parts of the podcast, or delete it completely, because she can't. She said things, and she's contradicted herself in multiple places. So it's a really awkward case. Sorry. Hey, you. I'm not playing with your. She's on the bed growling at me because she wants me to throw this. She's now looking at me like, so I'm gonna have to throw it once. But if you hear growling, that's what's going on. All right, it's Maria Farmer. Anyway,
see, people can see we got nothing to hide.
Yeah,
we're not even editing this out.
No, 100% authentic.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I had a bit of I didn't expect any of that. And I'm not stupid. I know when someone's seeding someone in, and I'm a really good researcher. And she seems to have underestimated nearly everybody on the independent media. She thought they were all idiots, and she treated them like that. And some people have acted like idiots. Some of the people who have her on their show and go back and delete through, like I'm talking about a woman called Carmen Struder, for example, Studer. She goes through her previous interviews with Maria, and she's got to delete them. So what's the point of creating content? If the person who you created content is going to lie to you on it, then he's going to make you delete it, and then he's going to ask you to record another one. It's just ridiculous. I know people who originally spoke with Maria. I won't say, like, there's a group of people who originally spoke with Maria who won't respond to certain emails now because there's just no point in it. It's obvious that there is an operation, and it was run from 2019. And so I'm about to show you that Maria Farmer, her story doesn't line up, and I couldn't understand why it didn't line up, and it led to Stan Pottinger. When I first come across the name Pottinger properly was because Maria Farmer was in a relationship with him, a sexual relationship with him, and I couldn't understand it because I thought it must be she must have been seeing his son Matthew Pottinger, who's about 50 now, and she's about 54, 55. I thought that must be what it is. I found a load of things. I found a load of evidence that just didn't make any sense, and I realized and also she admits out loud in different videos. A lot of these have been deleted online, offline, but have been now saved offline by a group of people who I have saving every single one of the videos for evidence. Because eventually, Maria, we're going to court, love. Eventually, I am going to take you to court. Eventually, me and you, we're going to see each other in court, girl, because you've gone too far. In many ways, some of the things you said, and she's been on a campaign. Now, you want to see a crusade, you go and see, I'll eventually build up a nice video montage of the videos she made about me before I'd even said anything about her. So before this moment now, where I'm saying something out loud, I'm speaking out loud, she's calling me things like Johnny Predmore and stuff and putting my name on TikTok videos. I know.
That's weak.
I know. So what I did
Keep us
was
out of it.
Yeah, it's too late for that.
We're not pointing the finger here.
It's too late.
We don't know you, Maria. We don't fucking know you.
We barely know Johnny.
Yeah, I know. These guys have got nothing to do with it, Maria. Leave them out of it, mate. No, you will get the person contact you and try and you'll get 2 or 3 different people. I'll tell you who their names are, and you'll get them contact you. And then what's really bizarre is they contact me and they tell me, I'm on your side. I've turned against Maria now. I don't want to blah, 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 blah. And then the next week they're making videos about how horrible I am and how nice Maria is, and it's just they can't even control themselves. It's like a group of narcissists that went out of control and felt a little power. So basically, I discovered that Stanley Pottinger had been in a relationship with her for a while, and Maria Farmer had put out the story that basically she had been in hiding since the Vicky Ward article. Vicky Ward came out with an article. She was supposed to do a piece on Maria, and she met Maria, and then the piece turned out to be a puff piece on Epstein. So listen, I don't know what actually happened in the past, but I know that in the middle, all of the stuff that Maria was saying is a lie. She did not go into hiding after that at all. And so we're going to have to go through some stuff, and some of it is going to be really, really sad for a lot of people who put a lot of faith in a woman who has ridden on the back of sexual assault. And here we are. Take Home and Nude 2006. While Maria Farmer is in hiding, she is also listed here taking part. Maria Farmer, as you see her name written right by there. In actual fact, it's written right near her teacher's name, one of her teachers, the person who she's pictured with in probably appear in the article, maybe Eric Fischel, who has some of the most suspicious of paintings that you could possibly ever see, and people note that quite a lot. His nudes of little young girls with suggestive names. It causes issues for some people. Now, on the benefit committee were some big names too. One of them that you would know of course, would be Liev Schreiber, who turned up to these events. Yeah, Liev Schreiber. But I mean, if you trustee of Hugh Carey, anybody else? What about royal patron? How about King Charles I being a royal patron? That's interesting, isn't it? How about the people who first introduced Maria Farmer? The person who first introduced Maria Farmer to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. If you were in hiding, would you want that person, the first person to ever introduce you and to force you to apparently sell your art at half price to Ghislaine and Jeffrey? Yeah. And she tells that story around. Would you want Guggenheim to know you were there? Because I can tell you that at this Take Home a Nude auction in 2006 in New York City, here is Eileen Guggenheim. Here is Ellie Tahari, who hosts the event. And this is where Maria Farmer's art was being displayed while she was in hiding to the people she was in hiding to. So I've got problems straight away with Maria Farmer's rundown events. Here you go, 2006, Eileen Guggenheim and Ellie Tahari at the Take Home a Nude. Oh, what's this? Oh, of course it's Maria Farmer, and it's a Twitter account in 2011 when she's in hiding. Of course it is, because when you're in hiding, it's really good to tell everybody about your art and everything about your life. She's big into cat rescue back then. Is actually a Facebook account as well. Her Facebook account, one of the posts, I think it's on her Facebook, it's either Facebook or Twitter, where she says, can anybody get me in touch with Eileen Guggenheim, the person she's supposed to be in hiding from, but she's saying this in 2011. So what about mariafarmer.com? How about mariafarmer.com? If you were in hiding, would you want to tell people about all of your life and have your own website that's literally in your name called mariafarmer.com? Every time I looked into something, there was something wrong. And it got even worse. It got even worse when I got to the conspiracy. The conspiracy involving Maria Farmer and Stan Pottinger. Because here we have Federal Anti-Fraud Enforcement, LLC. You see, Maria Farmer was intimately involved in this case, it seems, before she filed her first affidavit and before that book, Relentless Pursuit, give her a backstory. And before all of that stuff, we hadn't really heard of Maria Farmer. But in 2017, 5th of July 2017, 2 years before the arrest of Jeffrey Epstein, 2 years, that's quite a long time, Federal Anti-Fraud Enforcement LLC was registered at 49 Twin Lakes Road, Suite 100, South Salem. Do you remember who lives in Twin Lakes? Can anybody guess who lives in Twin Lakes? It's not the only one either. There was another one. It was QTAM Consultants Limited, was also registered around the same time. 49 Twin Lakes Road, Suite 100. You like saying that? QTAM. And there you go. There's the LLC, the information about the address. I think we know the address there. And I'm wondering if will it actually say here? I think it says it here somewhere. Or if it doesn't matter too much, because eventually they got themselves a website, didn't they? The Federal Anti-Fraud Enforcement LLC is a combat fraud, waste, and abuse in Medicare and Medicaid programs. That's strange, isn't it? Talks about Medicaid. It's all about these sort of programs. And if you look at the About page, and here you go. There's J. Stanley Pottinger, who works there, Shana Praga and Brittany Henderson, who are part of Bradley Edwards' group. Oh, David Bowies is there as well. Look, David Bowies is there. It's good David Bowies turns up. And Margaret Cassidy. And, of course, Maria Farmer. What? Maria Farmer works for Stan Pottinger and David Bowies. And what? In a company set up in 2017? I can't get it. I can't get it. What does that mean? What does that mean? Chief Administrator of Website Services, has over 30 years of experience with research and intellectual property designs. Well, I mean, you can find out more because she has a page here, so you can tell it's definitely the same Maria Farmer, the CEO of Matisse and Degas Atelier at this point, going under her own name still, of course. I mean, she is in hiding, though, is FAE's chief research and editor for online news and information. Before assuming this position, she worked independently owned company in New York, where her professional focus was on web research, design, editing, and postings, so content. And it talks about where she studied and all of that and how she direction of Eric Fischel. It is definitely Maria Farmer working with Stanley Pottinger. And this is that's never been mentioned. Wow. Never been mentioned. And is there a conflict of interest in there? That one of the people who becomes named in the case and wins compensation in the case was actually working with the legal team beforehand, and it seems that she's told a load of Porky Pie's lies. She's told a load of mistruths all over the place. There is an operation going, people. There is an operation. And the most disgusting thing on earth is to use the sexual abuse of children and young women to make an operation happen, to work for the intelligence services on the back of raped children. So that goes with all of their gang. All of the gang who are doing that, you deserve more time than is normally due to someone like you. And I find it disgusting, and it makes me angry, and it makes me angry that I got to go through a year of proving exactly who someone is so that I can show people a basic truth that they should be able to see. And I couldn't see the truth myself once upon a time. I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it because we're all blinded by our own love or our own hate or what we want in life. We're all blinded by that. We're all blinded and we can't see it. And again, talking of that, go on to the next part. Alan Dershowitz. I don't like Dershowitz. Dershowitz is a dick. Yeah, everything he does is dickish. The way he speaks, he was obviously close to Epstein. He obviously protected Epstein's business interests. But in 2019, there was a concerted effort, which included with Maria Farmer's affidavit, which was completely aimed at Alan Dershowitz. Alan Dershowitz, I was working on the door, and Alan Dershowitz went upstairs, following a load of schoolgirls upstairs, where I did not see what happened. all of it was aimed, and then she tells this story as well. Maria Farmer tells the story of being assaulted that breaks basically the criminal profile for Epstein and Maxwell completely. I mean, it is so far removed from what is the criminal profile of Epstein. She's like, Maria Farmer is she's in she's coming up to her mid-20s when she's supposedly assaulted by a man who won't touch anything over the age of 18 mostly, and it's like, the way she tells it's just like nothing else. No other. I mean, I don't know what happened to her sister. I would believe fully well that her sister could have been assaulted, but Maria Farmer, I can't understand. Except for the fact that I now know that, and not only that, the people who I've seen evidence of, I've heard Maria talk about the same story about a guy she knew who worked for the CIA that she was sleeping with, and then tell the same story about Stan Pottinger. We've saved all of these videos. We've saved all of the evidence because we are going all of the way. Eventually, however many years it takes, I'm going to sit in court and I'm going to look over at Maria Farmer. And that's going to be a good time for me. I'm going to enjoy it. Now, Alan Dershowitz, he's dirty as hell, but he needed to be taken off the legal team. As I showed you earlier, Bowies and Dershowitz were against each other. Virginia Giuffre started up a case against him. This is Maria Farmer's affidavit. Here she is. She's talking about during her time. And it's within the article. I implore people to go read it. So she mentions Alan Dershowitz going upstairs. On a number of occasions, I witnessed Dershowitz at New York Mansion going upstairs at the same time that there were young girls under the age of 18 who were present upstairs in the house. But I think originally why she said this was because she's sleeping with the other legal team and she's being told they need Dershowitz off the case, and this is a move by them. She had a long affair with Stanley Pottinger. This has been told to me by multiple sources, that it was a long sexual relationship, which I think is ended now, and she says the most, like she does with everybody, she says the most horrible things about him, of course, but I mean, I don't blame her for that one. And then she tells the story of how she was assaulted, and you know, you should read this, and then you should read every other Epstein victim and discover that it does not fit the same.
Well, because they had a very specific blueprint when it come to the abuse
and the grooming as well.
And the grooming. So
yes,
it stands out against all of the others that followed a real definite.
It's a lie.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I've studied FBI profiling techniques, and I can tell you that they were stuck in a profile. Ghislaine and Epstein are sadistic, preferential pedophiles. They don't target with romantic gestures and nature a woman of that age in that way. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't actually sound like any of the other assaults that happen. And if you read, there's masses of evidence, masses of testimony out in public of people who have talked about their stories. None of that makes sense. So I don't want to give her any more breath apart from the breath I'm going to give her later. Because that is, I mean, if people want to see a crusade and they say, oh, it is a crusade, okay, then we'll have a crusade, and we'll see who wins, who comes out on top of a crusade with someone who's provably been lying consistently and saying the nastiest things about people. I think partially she did that because at one point she thought she was going to die. She had cancer, and I thought she was going to die. Now I don't believe hardly any word that ever comes out of her mouth. So let's leave her behind now. She'll come up at the end. I'm going to read out her last sentence at the end, which is really important. She'd come up at the end, just mentioned. This talks about, we're coming right to the end of this now. This is from NPR. And this talks about something that happened in 2019 around the same time. Everything was happening in 2019. Of course, Epstein's arrested. Maria Farmer's affidavit come about 4 months before Epstein's arrested. So it's all like rolling. It's a rolling ball. And one of the things that happened is some random guy who was called a hard-drinking burly man who promised that he could link powerful politicians, globe-trotting luminaries to late Jeffrey Epstein, the financier and sexual predator. He claimed that he had video evidence of prominent men at Epstein's properties having sex with women and girls. And he said he wanted a load of money. And basically, Pottinger is caught trying to sell off to make money out of this. Pottinger is later caught saying, well, Kessler, this guy who's this secretive guy, no one ever knows who he is. No one still knows who he is. But Kessler shared with the Times text that Pottinger had sent in which he had drawn up a hot list of prominent men as possible targets. So he had decided which ones were prominent that were possible targets. Who were any of these ones? Bowie's was not copied in the exchanges. It seems the Times wrote, it seemed to Kessler like Mr. Bowie's and Mr. Pottinger were plotting to use his footage to demand huge sums from billionaires. He said it looked like blackmail.
Yeah, rather than exposing them. Yeah, just take their money.
Pottinger suggested this is what all of this gang's about. Anybody who's involved with these guys are involved. They're dirty, dark, and they're devious. Pottinger suggested in his text that lawyers could make up to 40% of the money they negotiated in private settlements. Pottinger confirmed the texts were authentic. The paper reported Pottinger said he had been deceiving Kessler to get him to share what videos and other documentation he had against Epstein's friends. Pottinger also told the paper he informed the FBI and federal prosecutors about the material Kessler claimed to have. Emails between Bowie's and Times reporters show him wrestling over whether to trust Kessler, hoping but not certain information. Eventually, this guy Kessler disappears. But this is what's really interesting. The Times used Kessler's communications with Pottinger to convey a story of hypocrisy and greed about Bowie's as well. Here's the defining passage of the article. Mr. Bowie's and Mr. Pottinger would go from toasting Kessler as their whistleblower and informant to torching him as a fraudster and spy. Kessler was a liar, and he wouldn't expose any sexual abuse, but he would reveal something else. The extraordinary, at times deceitful measures elite lawyers deployed in an effort to get evidence that could be used to win lucrative settlements and keep misconduct hidden, allowing perpetrators to abuse again. And this is what I'm talking about. Mr. Bowie's has publicly decried such deals as rich man's justice, a way that powerful men buy their way out of legal and reputational jeopardy. This is how it works. And this is the article that they were talking about here, the Jeffrey Epstein's blackmail, the lucrative hot list. It's on the New York Times.
Is this the big burly man that they were talking about?
Yeah. I think they've mocked him up. They've done it in this video too. They've like mocked him up in this video about this Kessler. And basically, then the Mail comes along and they do this article saying how two top lawyers representing Epstein victims were duped into planning. So they say, they're duped. Of course, into planning to cut details. Yeah, with famous men that they believe to be caught on bloody, blah. And they talk about it. But what's interesting in this article, which is from December 1st of December 2019, that within no time whatsoever, they're actually mentioning Maria Farmer. So they're saying the existence of the tape would support the theory that Epstein may have been blackmailing people who engage in illegal behavior at his home. Alleged victim Maria Farmer told CBS the late pedophile kept surveillance camera footage of some of the rooms inside the Manhattan mansion and that he stored in the safe. So first of all, they want people to think this. Yeah, the legal team want people to think this. Maria Farmer's going around to the Independent. At this time, she's not only talking to different things like CBS, she's now focused on the independent media, on talking to Bamas, on talking to Whitney, on talking to other people in the independent media. And she is spreading in some real dangerous rhetoric in there. And this allows Alan Dershowitz himself writes this article. Alan Dershowitz himself. And when I read this, I was like, what the hell when I first read this? But now it makes more sense because he feels like he could go up against it. He's like, this is a perfect opportunity. So he talks about Maria Farmer spewing 2-hour interview. It's hard. I had a hard time with all Jewish people, Farmer says. These are quotes that Dershowitz gets to use because these are quotes that Farmer put into the narrative on the independent media. I think it's all the Jews. I think the Jewish DNA is better than the rest of us. They think Jewish DNA is better. These people truly believe they are chosen, every one of them. All of the Jewish people I met are pedophiles that run the world economy. They are Jewish supremacists, and they are all connected. So what does this allow to happen? This allows Alan Dershowitz to come in and say,
he
look,
should get introduced to Kanye West.
Yeah.
They'd be best friends, wouldn't they?
Well, they could be. This means that they will then be able to say, look, she was on with that Whitney Webb, or she was on with that Jason Bamas saying all this anti-Semitic stuff, and allows them to tarnish the independent media as anti-Semitic, which is what they're desperate to do. They're desperate to tarnish and instead, one of the people who's working alongside Pottinger is the one who goes on and says, I'm a victim. It's all the Jews all of the time. Now, Maria Farmer says she's going to convert to Judaism. That's what she's been saying. She's now saying she's going to convert to Judaism
because she likes Friday Night Sin.
Well, yeah. But it's a sign. It's a sign that the operation is coming to its end, and she no longer has support, which is part of the reason why she says bad stuff all the time, then deletes all the videos. And then what happens in 2022, the end of last year, Virginia Giuffre drops allegations against Alan Dershowitz saying she may have made a mistake. And it all becomes obviously a ruse to get Dershowitz off the opposing counsel as having some sort of conflict of interest. So it's all exposed as a ruse. And I hate Dershowitz. I think he probably did terrible things. To fake or act like he did terrible things, accuse him of terrible things he didn't do, just allows him then to get away and look innocent. And that only helps all of the people involved in the Jeffrey Epstein scene. These sort of tactics only help all of the people who were employed by him, who worked for him, who are on all sides trying to get me to listen to exactly the same person who's a convicted 8 times for different name convicted fraudster, 8-time renaming. And then we get back to the end. The timeline of the Jeffrey Epstein scandal and that wonderful picture where
Ghislaine is still cross-eyed.
And she is still cross-eyed, and there we go. We're nearly there. There. I'm gonna say a last line that comes from Relentless Pursuit, but I'm gonna go to the article to read it. And this happens just after Pottinger and Edwards meet Maria Farmer for the first time.
It's kind of funny that it's called Relentless Pursuit, whilst you've been kind of
relentlessly
pursuing what the real story of all this is.
This is I tell you what, the independent media, bang bang bang, we're doing the jobs that they can't do because they will lose all their money. So those guys, their thing of the past, and this sort of thing just proves it is, we are relentless and we will continue. And there's too many of us now. There's too many of us. If people can learn to do this better, if people can do this better, then we will be able to expose everything. We will be able to do the job the press are meant to do, and that's what we're meant to do. And listen to this. This is one of the lines from Relentless Pursuit. To close out, and this is the end of the article, Brad Edwards describes a very curious interaction between himself and Pottinger just after they first interviewed Maria Farmer. On the way back from meeting Farmer, Edwards recalls, I came to see that Stan is like the character, the wolf from Pulp Fiction. He can handle any situation for anyone at any time. Stan has this diplomatic quality about him that makes him able to blend into any situation in any country with very little background information at hand and accumulate knowledge. I asked him if David had hired him out of the CIA to be his operative because of his former high-end government connections and knack for traveling around the world to handle mysterious business meetings. He said he and David had become friends while playing softball on Sundays in Bedford, New York, I couldn't pitch and he couldn't hit, he said. So when the game was over, we were pretty much left alone to talk to each other. This sounded like a cover story to me. So I asked, but are you in the CIA or are you not? He laughed hard enough to make the question sound ridiculous and said no, he was not. But I'm sure he didn't expect me to believe him. He then said, if I'm a James Bond, I sure am a poor man's version of him, which of course is exactly what a real James Bond would say. We both started laughing, and honestly, I wasn't sure if we were laughing because it was funny or true.
Wow.
Leave it up to you to decide.
I love the Pulp Fiction reference to the wolf, which we mentioned in the first episode when we said
was really
Mr. Clean.
Really excited when I heard you say that. I was like, I know what's coming. I know you're gonna, this has been an adventure. It's not completely over. It's got loads. I mean, the attacks on me are now going to increase crazy. The person who I was talking about, like I said, he's saying out loud, you no longer should listen to Whitney Webb. You should no longer listen to Johnny Vedmore. Don't listen to it. Just don't even watch them. Just don't even watch them. That's the videos that he's putting out now. And they'll delete their videos as soon as they realize that no one's believing them, and they'll try a new one. And they're looking to get the hook on so they can get their viral video that makes me look like a nasty person or makes other people look like a nasty person. The exact people they tried to infiltrate so that they could get, they could make us all look like anti-Semitic, nasty idiots on the independent media. And what's happened instead? The whole point is that these people underestimate other people. They always think they're the most intelligent because they're in the elite, because they've been trained up at these. They think they're the best. And what happens? Well, I'm not the best. I know that most people on the independent media have like foibles. They got their problems, they got their issues, they got their blind spots. Yeah, we all do. But what we're doing is something much different to what they're expecting us to do. They're expecting us to be idiots. And instead, what we're doing is going out there and we're just trying to find all of the truth. And the truth is so easy to see. And it's idiots can't see the truth. Once you can see the truth, you become more awake, and you become more intelligent, and you become more wise to how people work, and you see more things about. So the more they push us and the more they try and coerce us, the more they try and attack us, the better we become, and the worse it becomes for them. So I'm now in a situation. This has been a road, boys. This has been a road. We've done probably about 7 hours now of sitting down, going through this source material, and I feel like accomplished. Once I press send on this video and the article, and it goes out into the ether, whatever happens then is going to happen. And I've been looking forward to this. I've not been able to defend myself so far. I've only been attacked. So I've said, listen, there is something going on, and I will explain it all in detail. So that's been my crusade so far. Today, my crusade starts. Today it starts. If you want a crusade, that's what we're going to have. We're going to have a crusade, and it starts here, and it starts with the truth, and it starts with documents, and it starts with people reading and going, oh, but you know what that means? If she's lying, and if that's wrong, and if that's all false, and over there's false, and that they've done the same thing as they did in the first case, then it means everything is probably a lie, and we're about to see this whole house of cards come tumbling down. And that starts with taking away the bottom cards, but then ends by itself. So I won't be a part of that. I'm trying to pull away the bottom cards. And then I'm just going to step back. They're going to shout and scream, and they'll say the nastiest things. I predict you won't hear from Maria Farmer in a year. Predict it.
Well, I've got to say, on behalf of the whole Schism audience, Johnny, it has been an absolute drift down the wormhole. Pottinger, his connections with Epstein. I mean, me and Rhys, we've all touched on. We will do a follow-up episode.
Yeah. I feel like we definitely need to summarize in a shorter, more concise kind of way where we don't use the source material. But at the same time, I think it's brilliant that we actually have done these episodes showing people the source material, because
all your hard work.
Not only does it go into the intricate details of it all for the people that do want to know every detail, but it shows people how, I won't say easy, but how you can research it for yourself.
No, it is easy. No, you are right. It is easy.
It's easy, not in the length of time that you have to spend doing it, but it's easy in the sense that anyone, if they were committed enough, could do it. And I think that's great.
Yeah. I tell you, if anybody out there buys himself a newspaper's sort of archives subscription sites, note down a few other of the main archives and go hunting around. You don't even have to know what you're going to find. Eventually you'll find something. Out there is history, and a lot of it has been lost. Loads of it just lost to time, just forgotten about. And a lot of these cases, like for me, I'd always heard about Watergate, I'd always heard about Iran-Contra, I'd always heard about all of these different cases, Kent State and stuff like this, but I didn't know the gist of them. I didn't understand what was really going on. They were in a movie here or a movie there or whatnot. Now, I mean, things like this are a good adventure and good for everybody, because everybody gets to learn a basic sort of fundamental idea of each of these affairs, and then from that you go on to learn more and more, and we learn lessons from these things, and we learn how to spot when it's happening again and when we sniff it again. But yeah, it's been a long one. And J. Stanley Pottinger, here's to you, buddy. 83, 84. I'm sure you'll read them. Cheers, Jay. Cheers, Jay.
Jim will fix it for you.